April 1985, San Francisco. The boardroom was cold, not from the air conditioning. 12 men in suits, men he had hired, men he had trusted. You're being removed, effective immediately. Not one face met his eyes. He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out of the company he had founded without a word. Outside, the California sun was brutal and bright, and he thought about a garage. Every story you've ever heard about success is missing something. Not the struggle, not the sacrifice, not the sleepless nights. What's missing is the moment, that single, quiet, almost invisible moment where everything changed, where one decision, one conversation, one question divided a life into before and after. I've spent years collecting those moments, and every week I bring you one. This is Business AI Stories. Let's begin. April 1985, San Francisco, California. Daniel Cole was not an easy child, not difficult in the way that worried teachers describe in report cards, but difficult in a more unsettling way. He saw things differently. Where other children saw a toy, Daniel saw a system. Where other children saw a rule, Daniel saw a question. Why does it have to work this way? What if it worked like this instead? His parents were working people, decent, loving, practical. A family in the Bay Area had taken him in and loved him completely, but even in that warmth, Daniel felt the particular loneliness of someone whose mind operates at a frequency no one around them can quite hear. School was a disaster, not academically. Daniel was brilliant in the subjects that captured him and completely absent in the ones that didn't. His teachers wrote him off as inconsistent, unfocused. What they didn't understand was that Daniel wasn't unfocused. He was focused on something they couldn't see yet. At 12, he called a technology company listed in the phone book. He needed parts for a project he was building. The man who answered was so surprised by the directness of the boy on the other end that he not only sent the parts, he offered him a summer job. Daniel showed up. Of course he did. By 14, he was more comfortable inside a circuit board than inside a classroom. Electronics spoke to him in a language that made complete sense. Clean, logical, honest. Unlike people, a circuit either worked or it didn't. There was no pretending, no politics, no hiding. But Daniel Cole was never just a technologist. He was something rarer. A technologist who understood people, who understood what they wanted before they knew they wanted it. That combination, technical genius and human intuition, was the thing that would eventually change the world. But first, it needed a partner. Peter Nash was everything Daniel Cole was not. Where Daniel was loud, Peter was quiet. Where Daniel sold ideas with the force of a thunderstorm, Peter built them with the patience of a mathematician. Where Daniel saw the destination, Peter saw every step of the road between here and there. They met at an electronics hobbyist club. Daniel walked in, looked around the room, and immediately started talking to the one person who looked like he actually knew what he was doing. Their first conversation lasted 6 hours. They talked about the absurd gap between what computers could theoretically do and what ordinary people could actually access. In 1971, computers were the size of rooms. They lived in universities and corporations. They existed behind locked doors. Daniel found this personally offensive. Why should only institutions have this? He said to Peter that first night. Why can't a person have this on their desk? In their home? Why can't it be something anyone can use?" Peter looked at him carefully. "Because no one has built it yet," he said. Daniel smiled. "Exactly. Peter provided the engineering genius. Daniel provided everything else. The vision, the obsession, the refusal to accept that something couldn't be done just because it hadn't been done. Together, they were something neither could be alone. In 1976, they started a company in a garage, with almost no money and an idea that most of the industry considered naive. What the stories never tell you is what happened between the garage and the glory. The first year was not exciting. It was exhausting in the specific way that only building something from nothing can be. The kind of exhaustion that sits behind your eyes and doesn't leave when you sleep. Because when you sleep, you're still thinking about the problem. They had no money for an office. The garage was not a romantic choice. It was the only option. Daniel's family let them use it on the condition that they didn't make too much noise before 8 in the morning. They made noise before 8 in the morning. They sent letters to investors. Most went unanswered. The ones that were answered said, politely or not so politely, that the market for personal computers was theoretical at best, that corporations would never allow their infrastructure to become dependent on machines built in a suburban garage, that the idea, while interesting, was not a business. Daniel read these letters carefully, then he threw them away and went back to work. There were moments of genuine crisis. A batch of components that arrived defective and had to be returned. They couldn't afford to absorb the loss. A key supplier who went dark for 3 weeks at the worst possible time. A night when the prototype simply stopped working. No explanation, no obvious cause, just silence where there had been function. Peter sat on the garage floor at 2 a.m. and said very quietly, "I don't know what's wrong with it." Daniel sat down next to him. "Then we'll figure it out." "It could be anything." "Then we start from the beginning." Peter looked at him. "You're not worried?" "I'm terrified," Daniel said. "But being terrified and given up are two different things." They found the problem at 4:30 a.m. A single misaligned connection. 45 seconds to fix. 6 hours to find. That was the garage. Not inspiration and breakthroughs, though those came too. Mostly it was just showing up, day after day, for something that wasn't working yet, in a world that hadn't asked for it yet with money they didn't have yet. The first product shipped in small numbers, then larger numbers. Then the industry, slowly, reluctantly, began to pay attention, not to what Daniel and Peter had built, to what it meant, to the idea that the gap between computers and ordinary people was not inevitable, that someone had decided to close it and had actually done it. The industry paid attention, and then it paid money. Oh, the garage gave way to an office. The office gave way to a campus. 2 young men who had argued over circuit boards at 2 a.m. now sat in meetings with people who wore expensive suits and quoted market projections. It was dizzying. It was everything they had worked for. And beneath the surface, something was already beginning to crack. The company grew at a speed that surprised even Daniel. He drove it with a force that was equal parts inspiring and terrifying. He could walk into a room, look at something his team had spent months building, and say with complete calm, "This isn't good enough. Start again." Some people left because of this. Most stayed because alongside the impossible standards, there was something else, a sense that What they were building wasn't just a product. It was a declaration that human beings deserved better than what technology had given them so far. By the early 1980s, they were no longer a startup. They were an institution. But beneath the success, something was fracturing between Daniel and Peter. Their disagreement was not about technology, it was about people. Peter believed the company should be built around what was technically excellent. He had quiet contempt for the compromises required to make products accessible to ordinary users. Daniel believed the engineer existed to serve the user, that the greatest achievement of any technology was to disappear completely, to become so intuitive that the user forgot they were using technology at all. These were not compatible philosophies. The board made a calculation. Peter was profitable, manageable, predictable. Daniel was visionary, but visionaries are expensive. They demand things. They make people uncomfortable. The board chose predictable. Peter Nash was given expanded authority. Daniel Cole was quietly, systematically, removed from the decisions that mattered. The night it became final. Daniel sat alone in his office for a long time. Then he picked up the phone and called Peter. "Was it worth it?" Daniel asked. A long silence. "I don't know what you mean," Peter said. Daniel hung up. He never called again. And Peter Nash, the boy who had sold his calculator to help build a dream, never called either. Some endings don't announce themselves. They just stop. With the board increasingly restless, Daniel made a decision that would define the next decade of his life. He went looking for a professional CEO. He found Richard Holt, experienced, polished, the kind of man who walked into a room and immediately made everyone feel that things were under control. Daniel brought him in personally, gave him access, authority, context, opened the company to Holt completely, the way you open a house to someone you believe will take care of it. But Holt was learning something else. He was learning that Daniel Cole and Richard Holt had very different ideas about what the company was for. Daniel believed the company existed to build products that pushed the boundary of what was possible. Holt believed the company existed to generate returns for shareholders. Holt began building alliances, quietly, methodically. He cultivated the narrative, gently, persistently, that the company needed stability, that Daniel Cole's genius was undeniable, but his temperament was a liability, that the company had outgrown its founder. Daniel heard whispers. He ignored them. This was his company. The idea that the people inside it could turn against him was unthinkable. Some truths are so painful, we refuse to think them, right up until the moment they walk into a boardroom, sit at the head of the table, and say your name like a verdict. We are back where we started. The cold room, the 12 suits, Richard Holt at the head of the table. But now you know what it cost to get here, and now you understand what it means. When Daniel Cole stands up from that table, straightens his jacket, and walks out without a word, it is not defeat. It is not surrender. It is a man who has just had something taken from him that cannot actually be taken, because the thing that built the company was never the company. It was him, and that no boardroom could touch. Outside, the California sun was brutal and bright. He drove home. He didn't know it yet, but the most important chapter of his life had just begun. 1985 to 1996. 11 years of his life. 11 years of waking up every morning as the man who had been thrown out of his own company. Let that settle for a moment. Not fired from a job he took. Not passed over for a promotion. Thrown out of something he had built from nothing. Something that had existed only because he had refused again and again and again to believe it couldn't exist. The first months were the worst. Not because of the public humiliation, though that was real. The articles were swift and gleeful in the way that coverage of fallen figures always is. Not because of the financial uncertainty, though that was real too. The worst part was the mornings. He had spent nearly a decade waking up with the specific electricity of someone who knows exactly what they need to do that day. The company had been his compass, his language, the place where his mind finally made sense to the world around it. And now he woke up, and there was nothing, a silence where the purpose had been. He tried to fill it. He started a new company, a venture into animation, digital storytelling, the marriage of art and computation in ways that had never been attempted before. It struggled badly. The press was not kind. There is a special cruelty reserved for the fallen, a hunger to confirm that the original success was luck, circumstance, anything other than the irreplaceable quality of the person who achieved it. Columnists who had praised him now wrote his professional obituary with the quiet satisfaction of people who had never built anything at all. He read some of it, then he stopped reading it. Not because it didn't hurt, it did, but because he realized that paying attention to it was a form of surrender. And Daniel Cole did not surrender. But the years were hard in ways that success had never prepared him for. Success teaches you very little. It confirms your instincts. It rewards your decisions. It creates the comfortable illusion that you understand the relationship between what you do and what you get. Failure teaches you something different. Failure teaches you that the relationship between effort and outcome is not a contract. That you can work with complete dedication toward something and still watch it not work. That the universe does not owe you a result in exchange for your commitment. This is a devastating lesson. It is also eventually a freeing one, because once you understand that you cannot control outcomes, not only decisions, something shifts. The anxiety of needing things to work a certain way begins, slowly, to loosen its grip. You stop building toward a destination and start building, because building is the thing you were made to do. Daniel learned patience, the specific patience of a person who has lost control of outcomes and must find a way to keep moving anyway. He learned humility, not the performed kind, but the real thing, the kind that comes from sitting with failure long enough that you stop being afraid of it. He learned what he actually cared about. When everything is stripped away, the title, the authority, the validation, what remains? For Daniel Cole, the answer was always the same, the work, and slowly, painfully, across 11 years of wilderness, the animation studio became something extraordinary. It pioneered techniques that transformed an entire industry. It produced work of such originality that even Daniel's harshest critics had to acknowledge what was happening. He had not disappeared. He had been building again. The man who emerged from those 11 years was not the same man who had walked out of that boardroom. He was harder in some ways, softer in others. He had learned the things that only loss can teach, and he had not let them break him. He had let them change him. The call came on a Tuesday. His old company was struggling. The products had become complicated, exploded. The clarity that had once defined everything the company made had been buried under committee decisions and the desperate attempt to be everything to everyone. The company that had once changed what people believed computers could be was now just another technology company fighting for survival. They needed him. What the story usually skips is what happened next, because Daniel Cole did not pick up the phone and say yes. He did not feel vindication or relief or the clean satisfaction of being proven right. He sat with the call for a long time and felt something far more complicated than any of that. He felt anger, 11 years of it, rising up before he could stop it. You threw me out. You told the world I was the problem. You watched the thing I built deteriorate, and now you want me to come back and fix it? He felt grief for the time that had passed, for the product decisions that had been made without him, for the version of the company that existed in his memory, sharp and certain and alive, and compared it to what it had apparently become. He felt fear, a fear he hadn't expected. What if I go back and I can't do it? What if the thing I had was the company, and without it I'm ordinary? 11 years in the wilderness had taught him many things. One of them was that his confidence was not indestructible. And beneath all of that, somewhere quieter and more durable than any of it, he felt that it was his, that it had always been his, not as property, as responsibility. He had started something, and it had drifted from what it was supposed to be. And there was only one person who knew, in the deepest and most specific way, what it was supposed to be. He spent 3 days thinking about it. He talked to almost no one. On the third day, he called them back. "I'll come back," he said. A pause. "But on my terms." They asked what that meant. "It means I make the decisions, not a committee, not a board that second-guesses every product. Me," they agreed, carefully. "One more thing." Daniel's voice was quiet, but absolute. "The logo. I want it changed." There was a confused silence on the other end. "The logo has been the same since—" "I know how long it's been," Daniel said. "The company I'm coming back to is not the company I left. The company I'm coming back to is something new, and it needs to look like something new." He paused. A new beginning deserves a new face. What he didn't say, what he kept entirely to himself, was that changing the logo was also a statement of ownership, not for shareholders or press releases, for himself. He needed to walk back in and see something that said, "This version belongs to you." He needed to close the door on what had been done to the company in his absence and open a different door. The new logo was simpler, cleaner, the kind of design that looked obvious in retrospect, as the best designs always do. Daniel approved it without hesitation. Then he went to work. The company was 90 days from bankruptcy. 90 days. Daniel looked at this number and felt not panic, but clarity. He made decisions with a speed that shocked people who had grown accustomed to committee approval. The company had dozens of products and a sprawling, unfocused portfolio that tried to be everything and succeeded at nothing. Daniel looked at the list and did something that made his executives uncomfortable. He crossed most of them off. "We're going to do a few things," he said in one of his first meetings, "and we are going to do them better than anyone has ever done them before." Some people left. The ones who stayed understood they were in the presence of something rare, a second beginning. Then came the years of rebuilding, of restoring the culture, of reminding the company what it believed in. He was waiting for the convergence, the moment when technology had evolved far enough, when the culture of the company had healed enough to make the thing he had always known was possible. When it came quietly. An internal presentation, a small team, a prototype that fit in your hand and held 1,000 songs. Daniel held it, turned it over, pressed one button, and he knew, not hoped, not believed, knew this was it. The product launched in 2001 to a reception that mixed genuine excitement with significant skepticism. The price was considered too high. The market was too small. The technology press found several flaws. Daniel didn't read the reviews. He already knew what the product was. He had held it in his hands. What followed changed how people related to music. Then the company built something that changed how music was bought and sold. Then another product that changed how people communicated. Then another that changed how people navigated the world, each one carrying the same invisible signature, the belief that technology should disappear, that the user should feel not that they are operating a machine, but that the machine understands them. The company that had been 90 days from bankruptcy became the most valuable company in the world. There is a garage in a suburb outside San Francisco. It looks like nothing now. An ordinary structure on an ordinary street. The kind of thing you drive past without noticing. But something happened inside it. Two young men sat across from each other, surrounded by circuit boards and bad lighting and the particular electricity of people who believe they are about to do something impossible. One had sold his car to be there. The other had sold his calculator. Neither of them had any idea what they were actually beginning, only that it felt necessary, urgent, like something the world needed, even if the world didn't know it yet. One of those men would eventually choose safety over vision and spend the rest of his life in the comfortable shadow of what might have been. The other would be thrown out of the dream he had built, wander for 11 years, and return, older, harder, wiser, and carrying conditions, to do the most important work of his life. The garage didn't know any of that. It just held the beginning, as all good beginnings are held, quietly, without ceremony, with no idea of what they are about to become. Every great business started with a moment no one believed in except one person, a moment of doubt, a moment of silence, a moment where everything could have gone the other way. You just heard one of those moments, and somewhere in these books behind me, there are hundreds more of those moments, stories that changed industries, decisions that built empires, failures that no one talks about, but everyone should hear. The next story is already waiting for you. Subscribe, because whoever shows up next, you don't want to miss them.